Hi, and welcome back to the SKYLIT Books Podcast. My name is Tyler Austin. I'm a bookseller at SKYLIT, and I'm here today with two great guests who I'm going to introduce now. Born and raised in a small town in central Siberia at the time when the Soviet Union was falling apart, Artem Mozgovoy began his career as a cadet journalist in a local newspaper when he was 16. At 26, he was editor-in-chief. In 2011, as Russia began legalizing its persecution of gay people, he left his homeland. Having lived in 6 different countries, including the US, and working as a movie extra, a yoga instructor, and a magician's assistant, Artem today holds a Luxembourgish passport, speaks 5 languages, and with his Romanian partner, lives in Belgium. He will be in conversation with Dr. Kate Gale, who is the co-founder and managing editor of Red Hen Press and editor of the Los Angeles Review. She teaches in the low residency MFA program at the University of Nebraska in poetry, fiction, and creative nonfiction. She is also the author of forthcoming The Loneliest Girl from the University of New Mexico Press, and of 7 books of poetry, including The Goldilocks Zone from the University of New Mexico Press in 2014, and Echo Light from Red Mountain in 2014, and 6 librettos, including Rio de Sangre, a libretto for an opera with composer Don Davis, which had its world premiere in October 2010 at the Florentine Opera in Milwaukee. Thank you so much both for joining us. And Artem, if you were going to start us off with a quick reading of your forthcoming book, I think that would be phenomenal.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Tyler, for introduction. Thank you, Kate, for doing this. I can start by reading the opening of my book, Spring in Siberia. All the beauty of it, all the strangeness, space with no maps, time with no clocks, destinations with no way of reaching them. So many questions, with no wise man to look back at you kindly, knowingly, and explain. The feeling of injustice, of being the plaything of someone's cruel decision or stupid mistake. But whose? Who ever had the idea of coming to live here? Who decided to make it home for me, or for any human being for that matter? I've never felt at home here. I've always felt alien. Alien, it was my school nickname. I hated it, both the name and the school. I would wake up at 5:30 for classes that started at 7:15, feeling that it was not I who should go through this day here, but perhaps someone else. Perhaps there should be some other little boy who must drag himself through the winter night all the way to the school 4 hours before the sun even starts to lighten the sky. No, it was I. My mother's hand would reach in through the doorway, turn on the light in my bedroom, and then disappear. I'd pull myself out of bed and walk to the bathroom. The face I found reflected in the mirror was swollen, pale, vacant. Only 2 thin brush marks showed on the transparent whiteness of my face. It was as if I had melted into the background, as if I didn't yet exist.
I love that so much. I love listening to you read. Artem, so when I first read your book, one of the things I was struck by was how you were able to look at different parts of the experience in Siberia sort of twice. You had these different perspectives where you looked at it twice. And one of the experiences that really stood out to me was the experience with the grandmother that the young narrator has. So he first experiences the grandmother when he's very young, and the experience is exquisite. It's a very beautiful experience. But then when he gets a little bit older, he realizes that his grandmother's life is not as good as he imagined. And in a way, that mirrors his whole feeling about maybe about life in Russia, that in the first place, it's sort of a cradle, and then that cradle is not a cradle. Can you tell a little bit about that, how you re-envisioned the grandmother's home?
Yeah, it's a very good observation. And yeah, I think you're correct to compare his relationship to his grandmother, the person that he loved the most, and the person who loved him the most. You compared it to his relationship with Russia, with homeland. Yeah, it's true. It's that way, and it's a very torturous feeling sometimes. It was like this for my character, for Alexei, but it was the same for me since the book is autobiographic. Just recently, I went to I was in Berlin, and I went to see this Stasi museum. You know, the museum of a German KGB office. I took the train from the Western Berlin all the way to the east, to the Eastern Berlin, which used to be under Soviet domination. And when I got out of the train, I was so shaken by what I saw. Basically, I exited the West and I entered into the East. And what I saw was my homeland. It was the scenery that I'm used to, these identical social housing blocks that just multiply and mirror each other forever and ever, where, of course, the KGB used to be based. And the feeling was so weird, so intense. At the same time, it was a feeling of being back home, and yet being somewhere that I couldn't hate more, couldn't wish to escape more. Maybe unconsciously, I conveyed the same feeling through the relationship that Alexei has with his grandmother. Although he does love her till the end, but as we learn by the end of the book, she and her entire family and her friends, they all are what we now would call Putin supporters. They all vote for these horrendous laws. They all are epitomes. They're expressing this very things that are going to destroy Alexei or people like him. So how to find peace with this? This is one of the questions that I'm trying to find an answer for in this book. And I'm not sure if I did find an answer. I think it's very, very difficult how to navigate this bizarre existence.
Because when he's young, he's blissfully ignorant, and he loves his friends.
Yeah. He maybe it's the ignorance, naivety. Maybe it's also the fact that the world is more gentle with children, right? And as he's growing up, like it happens in the lives of many queer people, as he's growing up, he starts to realize that, wait a second, am I being loved and accepted for who I am, or because I haven't been completely honest or open with myself or other people that I care for, they don't love me at all the way I am. They don't know me at all. And the country the same. The nation can be very gentle with children until they grow up to oppose the rules and the political system. That suddenly the same beloved citizens turn into dissidents or worse.
Right. One of the scenes that is a favorite of mine, let me say that one of the things I like in a book is when, as a reader, we feel just a tiny step ahead of the characters, because I think that that's a sort of sign of good writing. And so in one of your scenes, you have the boy asks his parents for a present, and they have basically indicated that, he can ask for what he wants for his birthday, and he asks for a Barbie doll. And what's interesting is that he doesn't understand what he's asking for, but his parents know. His parents know at that point what they've always suspected was different about him. It's suddenly like a bell has rung for them. And what you realize as a reader is that they're afraid for him. They're afraid that he's in danger. And they are not going to give him that Barbie doll. And so it's such, you write that scene so well, because you suddenly realize that the boy has no understanding of who he is and of what country he's been born in. But his parents do, and that they love him and they want to protect him, but that they cannot change his nature. And suddenly you realize that he's in a place where he can't change his nature, and he'll have to get out to survive. And it's just so. Can you tell us more about that scene and sort of what went into it?
It's interesting to hear your understanding, the reader's understanding, and I think it's all correct. Yet, writing it, I never thought of all that. I never. You're right that once again the child is naive and he does not know all the dangers that he's facing, and his parents are trying to protect, to shelter him. Although, in my case, in my life, I never saw it that way. Of course, I just felt like this. This is what I tried to convey through Alexei, this complete misunderstanding, and on behalf of his father, of the boy's father. But yeah, you're right. You see, you make me realize new things about my own book and my own story. But then what does it mean to protect someone, right? What does it mean to shelter? And you know how strange today, as we know, this horrendous war that is happening between Russia and Ukraine, and the absolute majority of the Russians, 75, 80% support it. The interesting is that they have their own vision of what's happening. They are told that they are being protected, that Russia is not invading, attacking, is not being an aggressor here at all. In fact, Russia is protecting itself and protecting the Russian-speaking community in Ukraine from this threatening Western fascism, neo-fascism. So this notion of providing security can be very, very tricky. Another instance of that in the book, it's Alexei's mother and her little shop that she is trying to run after the Soviet Union collapses, and suddenly people are supposed to come up with a new market-based style of living without any experience of capitalism, any experience of buying and selling. And she's doing her best in this small town. And the first thing that happens is that the local mafia leaders show up and they say that they are going to protect her. They're going to protect the little shop. Nobody asked for their protection. Nobody needed that protection. In fact, the only threat that the shop was facing was the mafia itself. So depends, I guess, what perspective we are taking, from what position we are trying to see the reality. And if we take the Alexei's father perspective, or Vladimir Putin's perspective today, they are doing something honorable, wonderful, providing security, protecting. Yet, I don't know, was that protection really required, asked for, needed. Another question that I keep looking answers for.
Right. So, so in a way, this young boy doesn't need to be protected from himself.
Yeah, it's so hard, and this is what I try to. The opening line of my book, all the beauty of it, all the strangeness, and the whole story is playing with these notions and trying to understand it better and see both sides. But we can only be subjective, right? We can as a writer, I can only have my vision. I cannot ever pretend to have the hold of objective truth. And it is Alexei's story, and in his story, his father is antagonist. He is someone who fails to love him, fails to accept him, fails to. But maybe you're right. Maybe all he was trying to do was protecting. But then, what also protecting from providing security, protection is something to do with fear.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is never the right model to act upon, never the right guiding force. Yes, his father is afraid that people will laugh at Alexei, people will ridicule, people will persecute, people will. But to me and to Alexei, it's not fear, it's love that would matter.
Mm-hmm.
And that love that his grandmother, his mother, do manage to provide. Doesn't that like better than any protection? Isn't love better security, better protection?
Well,
Yeah.
so that's part of the key question of this book is if the people close to Alexei asked the question of love, then they would be asking the question of where he could flourish. And maybe that isn't staying in Russia. But if they're asking the question of just where he can be safe, then the question is perhaps that he should align himself with what he, quote, should be doing in Russia, which obviously the rule in Russia is just to, quote, be straight, which essentially means to pretend to be straight. I would assume. No.
Yeah. It's more than just, you can be gay, but you should be hiding, you should be pretending, you should be lying, you should get married, you should have children. You should play by the rules. You should play by according to this very strict set of so-called traditional values that Putin says now he's protecting traditional values of Russia from the globalized evil West. Yes, and these are the two paths that basically Alexei is facing, either to follow his father and keep pretend that he is someone or he is not, for the sake of being in security, for the sake of being, well, you cannot be happy that way, for the sake of being safe, or follow his mother's model and express himself and accept himself and face the persecution, but find an independent path to be yourself, perhaps somewhere else, perhaps far away from both parents and the country. Yet what can there really be another path to solve it, to find here? It wasn't an option for me in the end, and it wasn't an option for Alexei in the end.
So, can you talk a little bit about Siberia itself? I think when most Westerners who have visited Russia at all, I think or at least have been acquainted with Jason Schneiderman, who's one of the Red Hen poets. He has been to Russia, but certainly not to Siberia. So most American people who have been to Russia before the war have been to Moscow, to St. Petersburg, not to Siberia. I think people who are birders end up sometimes going to Siberia. I think there must be some bird migration going on there. That's my grandfather was an ornithologist and a professor at Gale, and I think he ended up there. So what is the setting of Siberia? Obviously, you were familiar with it, but you weren't tied to that. What does the setting of Siberia do for you when you were working on this? Did it feel like the most extreme part of Russia to write about? How did that play into your writing of this book?
Well, I can call myself a native Siberian, at least half, since my mother is from an indigenous native community, and I grew up there. And this is basically the only Russia that I know. Well, geographically, of course, it's very remote, and it's the size of 2 Canadas, so it's enormous. Culturally, what's important to understand here is that it is not Europe anymore. It is not part of European culture, European geography anymore. There is this line, that natural line, the mountains, Ural Mountains, that split Russia into what lies west of the mountains is European part, and this is what is more or less known in the West. This is where all the famous writers and composers and so on come from. So Moscow, St. Petersburg, and the area. And then there is the whole eastern part, which is Siberia, that is basically linked actually with Alaska, with the United States. So Siberia is very, very close to America geographically. Even closer it is to Kazakhstan, Mongolia, China, and other undoubtedly, unquestionably Asian countries. So this is the setting. It's not Europe, it's not West anymore, and it's separated from Russia itself. Of course, historically, Siberia is a place where people were exiled. They were punished for whatever they've done, political crimes or not crimes at all, cultural missteps. They were sent to first to live in Siberia before the revolution, and then after the revolution, they were sent to gulags, to concentration camps. And millions of people, up to 60 million of people, died in those concentration camps, which were very similar to the Nazi concentration camps in Europe. Now, the social backdrop here, there are very few cities, big cities, urbanized, industrialized communities in Siberia that were set there during the Soviet period, so in the last century, for one sake, to extract natural resources. Taiga, the hometown of Alexei, and the area where I come from, Kuzbas area, is the coal mine, the coal heart of Russia. I think 5 or 8% of all global reserves of coal come from there, and we still have functioning open basin, open coal mines in there. So these big cities is basically where people live today, because 99% of all indigenous communities were dealt with. And this is where most of the book takes place. The outskirts of the big city that looks like a village to Alexei, his grandmother's world, and the big city where he and his mother eventually moved to. Yes, it is remote and not even well known to the European Russians, and yet so many people live there, and it's such a big territory. I feel like it's just so unfair that it's completely ignored, have been ignored for centuries. And even today in Europe, all these gas problems that we have now in Europe, all that natural resources, they come from Siberia. All that wars that have been happening, they are in many ways about those resources. So it is an important part of the world, definitely very important to me. So I thought it was vital for me to put it on the map, to call the book that way, and to set the story there. Plus with the fact that this is the part of the world that I know the best.
So you know Siberia well, but I thought that you were also kind of working with the idea of the gay population in Russia being exiled from the imagination, and Siberia being a place where people had been exiled for so long. Dealing with that exile of the imagination and the physical exile, and kind of having those two in your Siberia.
Yeah, well, once again, you saw something there that I think is absolutely correct, and yet I never thought of it that way. Yeah, you're right. You can read the story also metaphorically, and the Siberian part of it. Indeed. In fact, Alexei's mother, she says that living in Siberia is like living in a perpetual exile. It is true, and the worst part about it is how hard it is to get out of there, how nearly impossible it is to leave, even though it's the same country, and you would think that you just get on a plane and go. But of course, the flights are extremely expensive, the distance is incredible, and there are simply no roads. Most of the cities are not even connected to the capital or to each other. So it is also, a very emotional setting, right? This ultimate remoteness, ultimate exile, ultimate loneliness, isolation, and yet feeling and being alien within that very alienated, very isolated part of the world.
Yeah, when I first read it, when I first read your book, one of the things I thought about in terms of a parallel to the United States was that, I live in California. My daughter, who you've met, is gay and lives in California, but lived for a long time in San Francisco, and a community that's very welcoming to the gay population, and she had a great time living in San Francisco, and feels very welcome in Los Angeles as well. But I remember, Matthew Shepard and what happened with Matthew Shepard, and he lived in a very small town. And I think that often people will say that, it's legal gay marriage is legal in the United States, and question why it would be difficult to be gay in the United States. But some of the things that you talk about are also true in the United States. If you live in a very small town and there is gay hatred in that small town, you might feel like it's a long ways to the next big city where there's actually a queer center or a queer bar. And if you're working as a waitress and you don't have a car, and you don't have the money to get out of that town, maybe you have a child or two, or you're a mechanic and you don't have the money to get out of that town, and there's a lot of homophobia in that town. How do you get out? How did Matthew Shepard end up in a very small town where there was homophobia, and he ended up getting killed?
Yeah.
And so I think that, it's very easy for Americans to look at Russia and think, that it must be terrible to live in a country where you could get killed for being gay. But people have gotten killed for being gay in the United States. And often the case is that people get stuck by poverty here. If you're in a tiny town in Alaska, or in a tiny town anywhere in this country, it could be hard to get to Portland, Maine, or Portland, Oregon, or San Francisco, or some town that's very welcoming to the LGBT population. We take it for granted,
Yes, I of course I see what you mean, and I think I had a choice to whether call this text a novel or memoir, and honestly, I could go with both. And in both cases, I think I would be fine with it. But one of the reasons why I didn't call it a memoir is because memoir is a very unique, very singular story by definition. It's my story, nobody else's. This is how I understand it, right? It's me. Whereas a novel is something that I don't see my story as unique. I see, or the story of Alexei as unique. I see it as something that is happening, of course, to hundreds of thousands of people around the world, and not just in Russia, absolutely. There are worse places to be different in the world. Sudan, I think, is one of them. It was recently on the news. There are better places, of course. But there is a certain, the extreme part of it. Of course, homophobia can happen anywhere, and it does happen everywhere. But there is also something different, and I sense it. I feel it when I read the stories of the Western queer writers like Douglas Stewart, and his Shaggy Payne. Also, poverty, being gay in Scotland. Ocean Vuong, United States. Being an immigrant, second-generation immigrant, and also poverty, being queer, no way to escape, etc. But how shall I put it? And I'm happy when the readers. Recently, I got a message from someone from Tennessee, I think, and he said that, "Oh my God, this is my story," and I was impressed. And I was happy that that I could find that kind of feedback. Yes. Well, look, there's a difference between in my case, in the story, in the case of with Alexei, there is no one that you can run to. There is no one you can ask for help. The system itself, the law, the constitution of the country is against you. The constitution of the country says that you are a criminal. You are a criminal just because you show your difference, you're being different. So that means, in practice, that there will be no place in the entire country you can run to. There'll be no New York, no San Francisco where you can escape to. Moreover, there'll be no one to ask for help because the authorities will be supporting your assaulters. If you are attacked, and if you try to find justice on media or in court, it will be your assaulters who will win the case, and you will be even further persecuted. Yes. So it is slightly different.
No, it's quite different. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
And sometimes when I read writers, like recently I went to listen to Fran Lebowitz, and she writes in a very funny and charismatic, charming way about how she escaped, how hard it was for her to escape New Jersey and to reach New York. And okay, I get it, right? I understand. But there's so many boundaries between legal and geographical and cultural between Alexei and New York, where he wants to get. It's like going to another planet, you know. He won't be allowed to board on the plane, even if he gets that money.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean,
sometimes
it seems closer to America before civil rights, when
exactly,
African Americans were being lynched, you know.
Yes, exactly. So right now I'm reading wonderful memoirs of Billie Holiday, and it's like reading my story. Like I can, this is something that I can closely and associate with all my heart. You know, I really really know and feel her pain exact. Whereas when I read Douglas Stewart, is a different level. It's not my my level of suffering anymore.
Right.
You know, it's impossible to level it, to find, you know, who stands where, but there is difference between what Billie Holiday's generation was going through and Beyonce's generation going through, right? Right. We cannot deny that. Right.
I do think that, you know, I met Matthew Shepard's mother after, you know, after he was crucified on a barbed wire fence. And she had not recovered at that time. I don't know how she is now. But I do think that America has changed since then. So I think that the level of homophobia 20 years ago, when Matthew Shepard was killed, was much more intense, I'd like to think. I think that now there's this level of transphobia that's going on. So again, America is a very violent country. I mean, there have been 300 mass shootings in 2023. So I, again, just don't want to underestimate how much, I don't want to speak at all for the trans community, but I think that the trans community would say that there's a lot of violence towards
no doubt, of course,
country, particularly because it's just a violent country. Too many people have guns and that kind of thing. But I also think that it's quite a different thing to live in a community where there's the institution supports this. And, you know, there are laws. The FBI does not support, the FBI will come after you if you are going after, the FBI comes after hate crimes, for example, you know, I want to make sure before we go too much further, Artem, in case you get to come back to Los Angeles, and I know you're hoping to come later this year, this bookstore, SKYLIT, is my favorite bookstore in Los Angeles. I hope that we'll be able to drive you by to visit. So you're looking at a picture of it. It always has this beautiful tree in the middle, and it has this beautiful skylight. It's in Los Feliz, and so I know
it's lovely.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful bookstore and has wonderful restaurants all around it. So when you come back to LA, we'll try to take you by there. But thank you, SKYLIT, so much for hosting this event for Artem. Artem's just been such a great author. And Tyler, we can't thank you enough for having Artem here. I wanted to make sure I said that because Artem.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, SKYLIT. I hope one day I'll get to see it.
Yes. Artem's hoping to be in the neighborhood sometime later this year on a
July maybe
of California. So we're hoping that he can come by.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, we really appreciate that, and we would love to have you. We'll happily host you for sure. Please.
Thank you so much. So Artem, you were just saying that. So when you first got out of Russia, how did it feel for you?
It was a shock. It was utter shock and a very, very, very good surprise. I honestly, yeah, I mean, people might hate me for saying this, but I honestly could not even imagine that things are so much better. I could not imagine that. I don't know. When I first got to America, and it was a very small town in Pennsylvania, and the first time I saw people with disabilities attending university classes, I was shocked. People using wheelchairs, because that never happens in countries like Russia. People like that are locked away and never have a chance to attend university course. You know, when I saw like you can press a button at the door and the door will open if you have difficulties opening it. I thought, my God, you know, what is this planet? When I saw a couple of girls walking on the street holding hands, I could not believe I wanted to cry. You know, I wanted to cry. And then, I was very hurt that I could not stay. I could not afford to pay my university. It was an exchange program, and I could not afford to pay the fees, and I had to go back. It was a shock. It was a great shock, and I felt even bitterer to my own country, and I know very well that every nation on this planet has its problems. But believe me, Alexei would give everything to move and stay in that small Republican town in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
I don't know how else to put it. Yeah. What also happens when the whole country, the constitution is against you, is that stories are silenced, voices are silenced. Nowadays, you know, I live in Europe, and when George Floyd was killed, more than 10,000 people marched on the streets of Brussels. Just think about it. Another country, another part of the world, yet it not just made news, it shook the world here, right? And people went on the streets, and I was one of them. But when things like that happen in Russia, or, you know, in other countries where we don't even discuss it, we don't even mention it. Media is not allowed to mention that the gay people exist in Russia. So there is no personality, no Ellen DeGeneres, no Ricky Martin, not a single openly gay person. If someone gets killed violently, and that happens on a daily basis, if it's a hate crime, not only it will not be investigated, but it will never make the news. Nobody will ever find out about that. Nobody will ever discuss it. And nobody will protest against that in European capital like Brussels. You see the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And this silencing is very, very traumatic, of course.
And the silencing feels like a kind of death to the story and to the narrative and to one's life in a way, because what makes your life move forward is being inside a story a narrative, and being able to speak your truth. And So being inside a country where truth is stifled is very 1984.
Yes, yes, and as you can see, I had to abandon my own language to be able to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go against yourself,
Mm-hmm.
to continue living. You have to deny part of yourself, your identity. You have to, because of course, stories like these are not heard, published, read in Russia. Before the latest version of the anti-gay law, they used to do ridiculous things like taking a biopic of Elton John produced in Hollywood, and cut out all the gay parts of it and make Elton John be straight for the Russian public. Just think of that kind of world. They did the same to Freddie Mercury. I mean, Freddie Mercury is still straight. He died of cancer in Russia.
Oh, did he?
Of course, nature. My father is the biggest fan, without ever thinking that he might be gay. It's just completely different worlds.
John is straight also.
Yes, I mean, the worst part of Russia in this respect is Chechnya. It's a state, a part of Russia, where they actually have a kind of concentration camps for gay men. And the governor of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, when these horrendous killings and lynching made the news abroad, he said, "What concentration camps? What? We don't have any gay people in Chechnya. We don't have any. As simple as that, So when you don't have any gay people, when Elton John and Freddie Mercury are straight, it will never make the news. You will never hear of it. You will never go protesting against it. You will never think of Russia as being a bad place,
right,
for trans or gay or black people."
When I was at the Sharjah Book Fair, I met with someone from Georgia, the country Georgia, and I was. They asked me what book I had been talking about at Frankfurt, and the book was the Carlos Allende book. I think you met Carlos. And I said, "Oh, I don't know if it's really the right book for you." And so then I asked how they felt about gay books in Georgia. And she said, "Well, we don't really feel we should torture gay people." And I kind of changed the subject, but I couldn't, she went into this whole thing about how she's told her children not to torture gay people, even though they're deviants. But she told her children this.
Yeah. Well, Georgia is slightly more progressive than Russia.
Oh my goodness.
But they are on the slightly higher step in that kind of evolution.
Yeah, so she had told her children not to torture gay people. And I just was like, I wanted to just kind of leave the meeting going, I don't know what to think.
Well, because, she's one of the most liberal, open-minded, educated people in Georgia. And that's why they don't torture gay people. They just simply throw them off the cliff or something.
Yeah. I literally never had a conversation like that in my whole life, and I was just so nonplussed. I didn't know where to go. Yeah. So there you have it. This I think this book will end up in many hands. It's an exquisitely written book, Artem, and just a really beautiful read. As you and I hope that it will be made into a movie. We think it would make a good movie. At least the whole Red Hen team thinks so.
How do we push it forward? Who do we give it to?
We're going to send it out to some movie companies and see what they think. But I think it would be a great movie. But it's a beautiful book, and a book about self-expression and someone finding out that they can love themselves and be themselves in spite of great odds. And I
also see it as a positive story. I see it as a motivating story. I see it as a story of how the strength in you.
Yeah, I do too.
Even the gentle strength,
right,
can be the whole nation.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's a very it's a story where he finds his way towards joy, and so I think readers will really enjoy this, and it's been such a pleasure working with you. And I will just say this too, since this is your first book, I hope you enjoy every bit of getting out and talking with readers and having book parties and book launches, because it should be a lot of fun. And Tyler, thank you so much for having us on here. This has been so much fun getting to talk with Artem. I don't get enough time with him. We did just party in London. I will say that, Tyler. I wish you'd been there. But it was a fun party, but I still don't get enough time with Artem. So this is really fun, Tyler. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you both so much for taking the time. And I love getting to kind of be a part of these things, because there's something so wonderful about hearing an author be enlightened about their own work by someone who clearly cares a lot about it, who's a reader. And I think that's such a joyful, kind of beautiful thing, where it's like, I never thought of it that way, but that's, it's an amazing moment to capture. So I'm glad that we can get that on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with you. And Artem, I hope you have a great, is it evening there, Artem?
Yeah, it's 8 p.m. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I hope you have a great evening. And thank you.
And you have a good day, guys.
Okay. And hopefully we'll see you this summer.
Yes, absolutely. So. Please. We'd love to see you at SKYLIT. And so, yes, thank you both so much again for taking the time. We really appreciate it. We look forward to having this out on our feed. And you should absolutely come to the store, SKYLIT Books, 1818 North Vermont, and order or pick up Spring in Siberia. It was published just last month, so we'll have it on the shelves, and you should come check it out. Thanks again, everybody, for listening, and have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the SKYLIT Books podcast series. We hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to check out the book featured in this episode, or others, please visit skylitbooks.com. If you're in the Los Angeles area, stop by for one of our live in-person author events. You can find a calendar on our website. If you like this podcast, leave us a review. It really helps us out. Our music is by Doug the Piano Wire. Till next time.